Greetings, this is Willie Muhammad with National Network View. On tonight's broadcast, contributors Sister Zakiya Sankara-Jabar and possibly our international contributor, Brother David Muhammad, will discuss the guilty verdict in Derek Chauvin's murder trial and what might be next in the process. Later, our contributors will also discuss the shooting of Ma'Khia Bryant and other Black youth occurring around the same time as the guilty verdict came down in the murder trial of Derek Chauvin. Lastly, student minister David Muhammad will speak on the plot against Black youth in America and share his insights from his new book about Black youth. But before we delve into those, we're going to cover our top news stories. So let us do a recap on the current events we've covered this week. On this week, I have a testimony. I interviewed our sister Yanaza Longworth about the genesis of a revolutionary spirit and the stories and experiences of her with her mother. Can you share with us just the genesis of your revolutionary spirit?
You know, I was born with my fist up. My late mother, Juanetta Lone Wolf, was a part of the American Indian movement. And she was, there was a protest of called the Longest Walk. And it was a protest from Alcatraz, San Francisco to Washington, D.C. in 1977, 1978. And so what I ended up, my mother basically was protesting and did that walk from Alcatraz, San Francisco to Washington, D.C. That's how Chief Ernie Longwalker got his name, is because he walked. It was Ernie Peters, but then they gave him a name of Longwalker because he walked from Alcatraz, San Francisco to Washington, D.C. So I was born in Washington, D.C. And so when I was in my mother's womb, I was hearing all of these chants. I was hearing the prayer songs and all of that. And so I literally was born with my fist up, born into a movement. And I think that that's where I get my spirit, where it comes from, is because of what I was hearing and experiencing in my mother's womb during that time.
Sister Yanaza Longwolf also shared her experiences of being taken in by the family of the Honorable Minister Louis Farrakhan and his qualities of humility, patience, and commitment. What testimony can you give that can give regarding the minister's love and commitment to our indigenous family?
You know, I think that with him he knows what all oppressed people of the world looks like, feels like. He loves our people, period. And with that, you know, I think that he's able to speak from a point of view of his own trials and what he has seen, what he has been through. And I've been on tour with him, and I've been to places throughout my entire life, and seeing him speak to the Native American youth, you know, he's able to speak to the hearts and the spirit of the people. And I think that that is something that we can all learn from. You know, some people say they love our people, but they do not understand our people. They don't understand the spirit. They don't understand the heart of the people. So they just speak it. And then, but in regards to, he doesn't. He's actually feels, you know, now they have a terminology of empath, you know, and I believe that he's always been very empathetic to he's always been able to feel people because he sees the God in them, even when they don't see it in themselves.
NNV anchor Robert Muhammad's guest on the El Asar report was Minister Ayman Muhammad, who discussed Farrakhan Speaks, the time and what must be done, and how America has become an armed camp.
Question: why do you think in America there's such an infatuation with guns and violence?
Well, you know, brother, America, as we mostly know, America is a nation that was built on violence, built literally on bloodshed. So there has always been the elevation of violence, and to solve problems not through deliberative dialogue, but through fighting. So that is literally what the United States of America is built upon. and it seeps through everything, especially the educational system. And so since we've been here, this is all that we have learned, that we should solve our problems with violence. And that is what we're seeing today.
For the How to Eat to Live segment, Robert Muhammad talked with the NNV contributor Charles Muhammad about vegetable selection.
Should there be concerns of too many genetically modified foods in the food supply?
At this particular time, in the United States, genetically modified foods have been creeping into the food supply. But we must first be specific on the genetic modification of foods, because natural genetic modification of foods does occur in nature. Now, the carrot, for instance, has a variety of sizes and colors, but that doesn't mean that man artificially went in and started injecting certain dyes or genetic material into the vegetables to make them change color or texture or size. Sometimes it's the adaptation element of life itself. It finds a way. And then finding a way, it adopts sometimes aspects of it, if it's of its environment, or it develops new characteristics that helps it set apart itself in survival techniques. So in essence, modification genetically is natural, but what we don't want is the artificial genetic modification.
NNV anchor Tariq X and contributor Nina Shabazz discussed a recent interview with Valerie A. Campbell, who's a 3-time published author and a relationship coach, on advising women how to attract the right man.
We did get into a little bit more of the specific details and how she came up with her specific formula, and just kind of what curated her particular platform. And this is what she was telling me.
I'm a data and energy coach, and how I got started was really, I didn't know, or I struggled with how to relate to men, because I was brought up in a household where love really wasn't demonstrated. And so I went on a personal search, a personal development search, to really find out about myself. And on that journey, I came across the law of attraction. And as the universe would have it, I landed in a job where I was surrounded by 120 men. I was the only female, the only black female at that. And throughout that 10-year period, I worked with these guys, and I would literally just interact with them. It was my teaching ground on how to relate to men. And they would confide their secrets with me, because I was actively interested in, how do you attract and keep a man? I would actively ask them the question of the day. And sometimes they would share their secrets with me and say, Valerie, we'd be banned from the round table for sharing this with you. And so I acquired all of this knowledge, and I would share it with my girlfriends. And as they implemented what I had passed on, their relationships would change.
Tariq X also interviewed Mark Harris. He's the director of 1555 Filmworks and the founder of the Inglewood Film Festival, about the release of his new comedy movie, White People's Money.
So I see you have a new movie coming out May 7th, and it's a comedy called White People Money. So tell us a little bit about the film and why you made this particular film.
So the theatrical release is May 7th. It's going to hit, it's going to be in limited theaters, which is going to be in Texas, Cleveland, Detroit, and then we're going to announce more cities by tomorrow, and then more cities next week. But the video on demand release is actually tomorrow, where it's going to be on Amazon Prime, Apple TV, anywhere that, Vudu, anywhere that you can purchase a video on demand or movie is going to be there. But the reason why I made this film, because I wanted to touch on the subject of a couple, like the question was, like, if you had $1 billion, what actually would you do? How would you, what would you do for your community? And so we have the brother played Barton Fitzpatrick, who plays a character by the name of Kareem, who wins $1 billion. And when they win this money, him and his girlfriend, when they win this money, they they want to live the good life. They want to get the big homes and the fancy cars and so forth and so on. But when they do get those things, they discover that those things don't make them happy. So what they do is they decide, okay, since we have $1 billion, what we're going to do is we're going to start building up the community that they're from. And so that was the reason I wanted to do this film.
Investor Vernon Muhammad at Musa Global Holdings, Inc. spoke with Tariq X about blockchain investments, wealth building, and cryptocurrency.
With all the craze about cryptocurrency and trading and investing, and everybody is wanting to get involved, first, can you just give us a little bit of information on what is a blockchain and what is blockchain technology? Sure.
Blockchain is simply, the best way to understand it is it's just a record of transactions. For the old school people who used to have checkbooks, if you remember a checkbook, in the back of the checkbook, there used to be this long, this pages where you can write down the date and the time and what check you wrote and what check number. A blockchain is simply just a digital version of that ledger or record of transactions. And the blockchain technology is technology, just like Microsoft Windows or Oracle or whatever. It's technology that takes that record of transactions and turns it into a computer coding that actually serves a function.
Our NNV anchor Rosalind Park spoke with Bryony Muhammad. He's an NNV contributor and Final Call newspaper reporter about China's human rights abuses and Uyghurs, Muslims, and other ethnic groups in China's Xinjiang region.
Why is China cracking down on Uyghur Muslims and other minority ethnic groups in its northwest Xinjiang province?
Well, this has been a long time issue between the groups of people in that area and the Chinese government. It's an area that is considered East Turkestan by some who dispute the area, that, and China, of course, is saying that this area belongs to them, and that's where they get the name Xinjiang from. And the problem, according to the Chinese government, the officials say that the actual problem with the Uyghurs is that the Uyghurs are a group of radicalized Muslims, as far as what China is saying, because the Uyghurs, which is the largest ethnic group in that area, are in a battle and has been in a battle really since around 1949 and beyond, but truly since 1949, in a battle for self-determination, because they are not Chinese people. They have their own language, they have their own culture, and they want to be independent of China. And so they have been in this all-out battle over the years for self-determination.
Rosalind Parks also talked with Delphine Sellers of the Urban Community Ergonomics about the nonprofit organization, which is located in Durham, North Carolina, and their partners from the Catawba Trail Farm.
Where is Catawba Trail Farm located?
It's actually located in Durham, North Carolina, in what we call Northern Durham. If you wanted the actual address, it's 2080 Sawmill Creek Parkway here in Durham. We're on 53 acres of land.
That's
the majority of it now is wooded, which is one of the draws to the farm. So probably from 15 to 20 acres is what we're working on, and the rest remain in forest area. Okay. Right now we have plans to clear an additional 2 acres of the land so that we can provide access to more individuals who want to learn the skill and the trade of farming. So other than that, it will remain forested for camping, for hiking, for other outdoor activities such as bird watching even.
So let us pause for announcements from our sponsors. And when we return, we will have our sister Zakiya Sankara-Jabar and Brother David Muhammad will speak on the Chauvin's recent guilty verdict. We'll be right back.
Be a part of the force that powers truth in journalism. Your support helps us to highlight solutions for a brighter tomorrow. Go to nnvnews.com/donate.
Asiatic Minds, online education, helping our children to discover their God-given skills, gifts, talents, and passion that will allow them to see their greatness, as well as the greatness of our people, and upon discovering that greatness, infusing them with the desire to use it for the betterment of themselves, their families, our people, and the world. Call now, 502-219-4848.
This is Sister Sajda Muhammad. We are proud to announce that the Sajda House commemorative Elijah coins are finally here. This priceless heirloom, made from recycled copper from the messenger's home, is now available at sajdahouse.com.
The hashtag Bank Black social media campaign made strides not only in revolutionizing how we bank, but also how we think. The movement inspired thousands of African Americans across the country to transfer or deposit millions of dollars into Black-owned banks. These are banks that will invest in urban communities, employ African Americans, support Black businesses, and inspire Black home ownership. This is a very proud moment for our culture as we are taking small but significant steps towards building Black power through Black wealth.
Thank you for tuning in to NNV News. Please share your thoughts with us in the comments section below. Follow us on social media at NNV News, and please subscribe to our YouTube channel, National Network View. This is Clifton Muhammad with nnvnews.com.
Welcome back, and we appreciate that we have our contributors who will be joining us to discuss this segment. Thank both of you all for being on. And, you know, I had the opportunity to watch the former NBA player Dwayne Wade talk about his feelings as he sat and watched and awaited for the verdict of the Derek Chauvin trial. And he, like others, basically said that they were still fearful of the possibility of Mr. Chauvin being found not guilty, despite the video and the overwhelming evidence that was presented by the state. So I'll start off with you, Sister Zakiya. What does that say about the American justice system that people can see this video and have all of this evidence, but Black folks can still fear the possibility of a person getting off of a charge like that?
Yes, brother. Peace and blessings. I will say, you know, clearly we have had video evidence in the past and we have seen cops walk. The one that I'm thinking about, like from my youth, is Rodney King. There was video evidence of that. And the cops, all of them, walked. So it's not, you know, an illusion for us, you know, as Black folks to have this feeling of injustice. Like we've been living with it for 460 years now. And certainly police violence has been, and police murder even has been, unfortunately, a mainstay since they were slave catchers during enslavement of our ancestors. I did not, however, think that Derek Chauvin was going to get off. I didn't think that he would get all 3 guilty verdicts, but I did not think that he was going to get off. And I'll tell you why. Rebellions work. I know that there is mixed feelings in the community around rebellions, but rebellions work. And I believe that if the courts came back with a not guilty verdict, America was going to burn, period. Cities all across this country was going up. I mean, I literally knew people who were ready to put in work if it came back as not guilty. So I think everybody was on pins and needles, including the moneyed establishment. you got to think about this. The destruction of property also means like millions, if not billions, in insurance claims. The insurance industry, right, didn't really want that to happen. So that's my thoughts.
Thank you. And what are your thoughts about that, Brother David, especially from where you're located at in the world?
Yeah, well, of course, we were pleased with the verdict, and this is what was expected. But this being as high a profile case as it was, we compare it to two previous ones, the Rodney King case, the trial of 1992, and the O.J. Simpson trial of 1995, of which Netflix had recently produced a drama series on. Whereas in those former two, there seemed to be a more divided opinion based on race and ethnicity of what the final outcome should be in cases. With the George Floyd / Derek Chauvin case, there appeared to be somewhat of a more unanimous agreement or a consensus on the guilt of Derek Chauvin. However, I think that dimension of it is being somewhat of a smoke screen to promoting the idea of this illusion that there is now this finally established racial equality that has been waited for so long. And that visible perception of seeing white people on the major television networks breaking windows, marching, protesting, carrying banners and billboards and placards in support of Black Lives Matter and similar slogans, it is having a kind of relaxing effect on many Black people in the front line for the cause for justice. But we have to remember the consistency within which this is being done. And this is where law and history comes in. We have statutes in law that are based on previous cases for which a decision had to be determined, and then that is permanently established as a case study for future similar situations. And going back to the year 1669 in America, they passed a law called the Casual Killing Act, which made it lawful for any white person to kill any Black person if that Black person was disobedient to white instructions to return to a plantation. Now, they amended this law 3 years later in 1672, not to soften it up, but to make it even more draconian, where now any white person had the right to kill any Black person who even put up what that white person considered to be resistance to white authority. Now, coming years later, around the time of the 13th, 14th, and 15th Amendments, with the rifle associations being established in the Ku Klux Klan to reduce voting numbers of Black people in the southern states, there was the spirit of that law continuing within the dimension of law enforcement in the modern era. So even though we're all the way up in the year 2021, you still have the culture of the law influencing the thinking of the law enforcer, who still subconsciously believes that he can and will get away scot-free with killing a Black person. So
yes, sir.
The verdict of the case would go far to some degree in the pursuit for justice, the universal cry for justice, as the theme for safety was in 2015. But the struggle has to be kept up. There has to be the consistency of this kind of relentless pursuit of fairness and equity and humanity in dealing with these kinds of
leads us to that leads me to this next question, because some are still saying that it's too early for Black folks to be celebrating the conviction, because he may be given a lighter sentence than expected. So Sister Zakiya, what are your thoughts about that? Should Black folks be cautious about the celebration that we're seeing?
I don't think so. I mean, I think that it's okay. Like, let Black people celebrate for a minute. Like, we are constantly under siege. You know what I'm saying? I'm clear that, we still have sentencing, but I will say this for the folks who are on the front lines and working in these communities every day that are constantly under siege from these race soldiers in our community. it's okay for them to. I'm not here to tell people not to celebrate and to always just, have your warrior mode on. It's cool. You know what I mean? But at the same time, I think that, yes, of course, we would be, remiss if we weren't cautious about the time, that this individual should get. The other thing that I'm also looking for is that I believe he needs to be put in general population, no special treatment. Like, we know he going to jail, you feel me? But no special treatment. I mean, the prosecution needs to be clear about that. Ain't nothing special about you. You killed somebody, you have been found guilty of 3 different charges, you go on the general population, period.
It's something. Thank you for that response. And also, since 2005, 139 police officers have been arrested for murder. But out of that 139, only 7 officers have been convicted. And with this trial, we saw the police chief took the stand against one of his officers. So could this arrest, very rare, could this, along with the now video and all this that we're having, could the conviction of Derek Chauvin be the beginning of a change in America as it relates to these police being evicted? I mean, not evicted, convicted. We'll go with Brother David, and then we'll come back with our sister Zakiya before we go to our break.
Yeah, it could be the genesis of a change, but that is in our hands. The reason that the Derek Chauvin case became so big was not only because of the video, but it was the reaction of those who saw the video. And by the fact that there was this passion, zeal, and enthusiasm to pursue justice for him, that is what caused the global trigger reaction. And in response to what our sister said about, we can take a little while to come out of warrior mode, I align my view with her, but I would balance it on the other side of it by looking at the full picture. Now, I'm outside of America, and I'm looking in, and I'm seeing on the news around the same time as the Derek Chauvin verdict being handed down, the Olympic Committee, because remember, the Olympics were supposed to take place in Japan last year, Tokyo 2020, which is now Tokyo 2021, due to kick off on July 23rd. But the Olympic Committee made a decision to uphold part of their constitution called Rule 50, which bans all athletes from making political statements. And there's this high expectation that there's going to be a lot of calls for justice, a lot of Black Lives Matter representation, and a lot of cries against racism. And the Olympic Committee are putting out a ban on that. Now, this is part of the silencing of the voice. We go back quickly in history to 1968, when Tommy Smith and John Carlos raised the Black Power fist in the Olympics in Mexico. They were banned from the Olympics. They were ostracized, but they became national heroes later on. 4 years after that, for the Olympics in Munich in Germany in 1972, there was a silent protest. Same thing happened, but this one is referred to as the forgotten protest, where Vincent Matthews and Carlos, they also protested. Now, if you're silencing the voice of athletes,
I hate to interrupt you coming on this last minute. I want to hear our sister before we go to the break. We have 1 minute before we go to the break. I want to hear her comments on it. But thank you, my brother.
Our brother giving us a history lesson. It's all good.
With the dates and everything.
Yeah, he got the dates, man. And I'm already impressed because he got Blueprint for Black Power in the background. I peeped that, Dr. Amos Wilson. So I would agree with him in terms of not. I guess I would agree in terms of not getting too off of the.
Oh, looked like our sister had a disconnection with her stuff. So, Brother David, what we're gonna do, we're gonna go to this break, and when we come back, we're gonna pause for announcements from our sponsors. But both of our contributors, when we come back, we're going to be discussing the Columbus, Ohio police murder of Ma'Khia Bryant, and we'll be right back.
Be a part of the force that powers truth in journalism. Go to nnvnews.com/donate.
worldwide, 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. Download the Final Call Radio app and take us everywhere. On your phone, on your computer, on your tablet, on Instagram, Facebook, and Twitter. You can also log on to finalcall.com and click the Listen Live button, or finalcallradio.com. Final Call Radio, the official voice of the Honorable Minister Louis Farrakhan and the Nation of Islam.
Please share your thoughts with us in the comment section below. Follow us on social media at NNV News, and please subscribe to our YouTube channel at National Network View. I am Anissa Muhammad with nnvnews.com.
And what some are saying is an unprecedented move. Columbus police showed the body camera footage of the shooting of a 16-year-old girl by Columbus police officer just hours after the incident on the southeast side. The shooting, which happened 20 minutes before the verdict was announced for the guilty of Derek Chauvin being found guilty.
We have an update for you this morning on a story that Jerika Duncan has been following for more than a decade. Carrie-All Horn was dismissed from the Buffalo, New York Police Department after she intervened when a white officer used a chokehold on a black man. This was back in 2006. Now a judge has decided to reverse Horn's termination and reinstate her pension. Jerika Duncan spoke to Horn about why she kept fighting all these years.
And that was the wrong clip. But before our sister was had the technical issue, I want her to conclude that thought you were saying before you got cut off, and we'll come back.
I'm sorry. What was the question again, brother?
The question was in regards to, you were talking about the is it a trend? Like, are we possibly seeing a trend where more officers are going to start coming forward against these cops that are violating the human rights and civil rights of people?
No, not unless there is continued action and rebellions and uprisings from the community. I mean, we've had other rebellions. I'm in the DC region, and I remember in Baltimore, the uprising that happened around Freddie Gray. And it was just this year. Freddie Gray was in 2015. And just this year, we were able to get meaningful police reform in the Maryland General Assembly. So these things take time. This has been going on again hundreds of years, and I do not think that this is a trend. What I do think is different about this case really quickly is, again, the rebellion was just not focused on one city. George Floyd, there was rebellions almost everywhere, protests, I would say. There were protests, huge protests, like everywhere in like small towns, like, you know what I mean? All across the country, and certainly even in other, countries as well. One last thing I wanted to say about that, and I'm not sure if folks remember seeing this, but Joe Biden's U.S. embassy person for China went into a meeting with the Chinese president, or whatever they call him, prime minister, and started rambling on about human rights abuses in China. And you want to know what their response was? George Floyd. So it was global.
Wow, that's something. And as we transition to this next topic, the unfortunate incident that has taken place with our sister who there in Columbus, Ohio, has already sparked much debate, not just in America, but also within the Black community about whether or not the shooting was justified. So we'll start with you, Brother David, then we'll go to our sister. Just what are your perspectives on the whole shooting?
Well, as a Muslim, I would say that by the fact that it was a female makes it additionally disgusting to the extrajudicial arbitrary executions carried out of our people. By the fact that it was a woman actually speaks more into the lack of humanity of the perpetrators who carry out these heinous crimes. The Columbia Law School had put out a paper in 2015 entitled Black Girls Matter, pushed out, over-policed, and underprotected. And they, through their extensive research, highlighted a school-to-prison pipeline with our girls. And they spoke to the inordinate proportion of Black girls who are expelled from schools. And that there's this perception of our girls in the same way that there's a perception of our males. One commentator had used the phrase that they see when the police are about to kill a Black man, that they see them as superhuman in a subhuman way, meaning that you cannot just shoot them once. You have to shoot them 15 or 16 times. There has to be excessive electrocution of volts if it's a taser. There has to be 5 or 6 persons trying to restrain them. And with our girls, there's this perception as well that brutality against her is somehow subconsciously justified. And it's I see there's no accident that and a 16-year-old girl being killed, this would have been the same place where 12-year-old Tamir Rice would have been killed some years before. So that
Cleveland.
whole Ohio background,
Wow.
Yes, Ohio.
That's Cleveland, too.
it's not a coincidence. It's not a coincidence at all.
Yes, sir. So, Sister Zakiya, what do you say?
So I lived in Ohio well over 20 years until 5 years ago. And so I have a lot of deep relationships in Ohio. And that night, which as you all know, was the same night of the Derek Chauvin guilty verdict announcement. My phone just began to blow up from friends, family, just folks who are I'm still in community with, although I don't live in Ohio anymore, sending me videos of what had happened even before it hit the news, right? And I felt like somebody had punched me in my stomach. And absolutely not, it was not justified. Absolutely. And I'm honestly sickened. I'm gonna keep it real PC, but I am sickened to see Black people justifying the execution of one of our children. I don't care. Listen, that officer, 10 seconds before he dumped 4 bullets in that girl's chest. 10 seconds. So miss me with it being justified. He didn't assess the situation. He didn't try to de-escalate. He didn't do any of that. He hopped out after 10 seconds and dumped 4 bullets in her. So no, and especially now that more evidence and more stories have been coming out about what actually transpired and why the police was called in the first place, to me, it's even more egregious. And having that new information, and if you are a Black person still defending this race soldier, I got questions. I got questions for any Black person who would defend the actions of that cop that did that. Seriously.
Thank you. And so we'll talk with you, Brother David, and we'll close out with our sister. So from your perspective, is there anything that Black people can do to help prevent us from seeing someone else die like this in a similar incident?
Well, again, going right down to the roots of it, back in 2007, the Honorable Minister Louis Farrakhan did a 3-part series entitled Justifiable Homicide, Black Youth at Risk and in Danger and in Peril. And the minister highlighted the irony of how the words justifiable and homicide can actually be placed in the same sentence. And as our sister pointed out, that there are still Black people who would justify the actions of the police. Well, in truth and in fact, that's the only way that they can get justification that is considered legitimate. That if some of us lend our voices to the chorus of the lynch mob that excuses the executions of our people. So the minister also pointed out in that series that one thing that we have to instill within our young people for us to stop the killing of us. The sensitivity towards the struggle that we've endured of the 400 years of the most brutal, cruel crimes against humanity ever committed in all the annals of history. The Jews have been successful in passing legislation in 17 countries criminalizing denial of the Jewish Holocaust. But here we were victims of a Black Holocaust and we don't even know about it. So we have to, as a solution to this, increase the sensitivity levels of Black lives among ourselves. And once we can properly teach and train first of all, the men to see women as sacred, and both men and women to see our lives as sacred, and us as living organisms to see the shedding of our blood as an obscenity, then we will begin to change our cultures, and the wall of protection will be a lot stronger among us. And then the racist white police officers or those who come into our community and carry out these extrajudicial executions will begin to think twice about the value that we are placing on our own lives and our own community. So it starts with us to some degree. Of course, they are guilty, but we are partially culpable if we don't bring about some kind of internal reform.
Yes, sir. And what do you say, Sister Zakiya, before we go to our next break?
Sure. Yeah, I agree with a lot of what the brother said. I definitely think that we certainly need to police ourselves, period. I've, been on not calling the police with very limited circumstances. In fact, I was in a situation in December where I got the advice to call the police, and I said, absolutely not. And I figured out a way to handle the situation myself through community. A lot of times we are conditioned to call the police for every little thing. But because of this ongoing onslaught of police murder and police brutality, specifically against Black folks, that conditioning has unraveled, thankfully, for me. And so I think that any time that we can lean on our relationships, lean on the community, we should. And finally, I think we should support the FOI in the community, quite honestly, conflict resolution training, but also like when we need protection and defense, I'm a fan of the FOI for sure.
It's interesting, sister, you said something. I was on a call recently, and this former police officer, he talked about how Black people are like the largest, the word he used was consumers in calling police to come and address issues. I was like, wow, man, the largest consumers. So we thank that's something. We thank both of you all for tuning in, and I know our sister Zakiya is going to am I pronouncing right? Zakiya, right? Yep,
that's right, Zakiya.
All right, she's going to be a monthly contributor, and she'll be back soon to give more insight. So we're going to pause for some for our sponsors, but afterwards, Brother David Muhammad will talk to us about the plot against Black youth in America and around the world in his new book. We'll be right back, and thank you, sister.
Take care. Peace.
Be a part of the force that powers truth in journalism. Your support helps to combat false media. Cash App NNV News.
Greetings from National Network View. This week's Final Call cover story headline reads, "How much more can we stand?" The painful death of Daunte Wright, the traumatic death of George Floyd, and the Derek Chauvin murder trial in Minnesota brings into focus how fragile Black life remains, and the constant, elusive, and almost non-existent giving of justice to Black people. How much loss can we stand? And have we had enough? This FCN Volume Number 28 edition features the middle page article by the Honorable Minister Louis Farrakhan entitled "The Intensifying Universal Cry for Justice." To read more, subscribe to finalcalldigital.com and tune into the all-new Final Call Radio. This is the nnvnews.com Final Call Cover Report.
This is Sister Sajda Muhammad. We are proud to announce that the Sajda House commemorative Elijah coins are finally here. This priceless heirloom, made from recycled copper from the messenger's home, is now available at sajdahouse.com.
Please make sure you leave your comments and questions in the comment section below. Follow us on Facebook, National Network View, and make sure to check us out on Twitter as well, National Network View. This is Sergio Gutierrez with National Network View, signing off.
The Honorable Minister Louis Farrakhan for years has been working to warn the Black community about the plots against Black youth in America.
Fear that our youth are not afraid. Fear that there is nothing that they have devised that can control the Black youth. Fear because they understand the nature of the youth, the nature of the time, and what time has prepared in our youth and also in the youth of the oppressed throughout the earth. Now, what is the nature of our young people that make them the object of conspiracy and the object of fear? If you notice, you could be 15, 14, 16 when you are stopped by the police. They do not treat you as a child. Their fear of the youth is so intense that they kill our young people, either on the street or in police stations. They feel that they have to get rid of you, because if they don't get rid of you, they fear that you will one day get rid of them.
The plot against Black youth is not just happening here in America, but also throughout the world. Today we have with us our brother. He's our international contributor, Student Minister David Muhammad, who is releasing a book soon speaking on this topic. So, Brother David, can you share with us what specifically inspired you to write a book talking about Black youth being at risk, and what are you hoping that this book accomplishes?
The topic that I selected for my PhD research at the University of the West Indies. And it started off as a master's thesis looking at juvenile delinquency. But then we drew the conclusion that anyone who ends up in criminal gang activity or breaking the law habitually in general and ending up in the prison after living a lifestyle of criminality, that it would in some way be connected to juvenile delinquency. No one comes from a stable home, well-cultured, properly educated, and brought up with the appropriate type of training at age 18 makes a turnaround decision to become a criminal gang member or to begin to engage in some kind of negative culture like that. So it starts off with the home. And then we determined that there are 6 main causal factors of juvenile delinquency, which will eventually usher an individual into criminal gang activity, which were, first of all, broken homes, faulty parenting, and dysfunctional families, in particular, the dimension of absentee fathers being the most impacting causal factor or independent variable. But secondly, there was poverty and unemployment. Third was negative peer group influences, the allure attraction towards gangs. Fourth was a lack of personal self-motivation. 5 was educational underachievement or dropping out of school. And 6 was cultural deprivation. And it is really the combination of 3 of those factors. 1, absentee fathers. 2, negative peer group influences. And 3, the lack of education or educational underachievement that intertwine with one another to produce an embellished effect on the life of a young person. So, for example, not every young person who comes from a home without a father would necessarily go into that lifestyle. But if a child grows up in a home with an absentee father and they have underachieved in their education and are exposed to the allure or the invitation into criminal gangs, then one causal factor strengthens the other until we get to the point of the toxic combination, which tends to be the reality. The works that I've done in the prisons. I mean, I've made over 100 visits into the prisons in Trinidad and Tobago, and also in St. Vincent over the last 10 years or so.
And Dr. Muhammad, let me ask you this question. So you mentioned broken homes, you mentioned demotivation of the youth. So in your book, what solutions do you offer as it relates to, let's focus, we'll do two, because you mentioned broken homes and the lack of the presence of the father. What solutions do you offer in that book regarding those two specific factors?
Right. Well, we go back to that old African proverb that says it takes an entire village to raise a child. In the extended family type structure system, every single male adult within the family structure becomes a responsibility figure in the wider community. And every male in the wider community becomes a potential mentor to those who grew up in homes without a father figure. So a mentorship program, and men being bestowed with the responsibility of ensuring that the young men in the community are at least connected to some kind of pyramid structure, which is a project that we are launching very soon in Trinidad. It's based on a program that was called Adopt 2, where we get together a committee of about 20 men. Each of those 20 men must bring in 2 17 or under youths, and then we bring in more people and continue to grow like a structure. And we provide the direct mentorship by communicating with the school teachers in the educational institutions, and by networking with one another rather than withdrawing ourselves based on fear for our own youth, like the enemy has had that being terrified by them, that we now begin to patch up those missing spaces, fill those voids within the lives of our young men, and compensate for the shortage of fathers in the community. Now, that's what we can do from the community level.
And what you mentioned about the broke, so would that also be a possible solution for the broken homes? What are you recommending as a solution or action items to combat that issue?
But again, when we have broken homes, especially within an impoverished community, the man has, as part of his rationale, the inability to financially provide for his offspring. And that causes a sense of demasculinization for him. And he tries to compensate for that by demonstrating hypermasculine behaviors, by going to look for another woman to make more children that he won't be able to take care of. So that is a toxic spiraling cycle that we find ourselves involved in. But again, if we are able to network, unite, and pool our resources, as such, for example, a group of poor families can use the structure of the Honorable Elijah Muhammad's economic blueprint with the food, clothing, shelter, transport, education, health, and the 3 columns of level 1, level 2, and level 3. We can find people within our community of different skills, occupations, and professions to begin to rebuild through networking. And I use the analogy, if 1,000 poor people grow $1,000 worth of food in a poor community, that's $1 million in added food security at the end of that year. And that additional $1 million in food security is $1 million less in petty street robberies and crimes, and even drug abuse and drug addiction. So we have within our hands, and doing that won't be a hardship for anyone. Yes. But when you combine the effect and impact of the little that everyone is doing for the community, it turns out to be a lot for the same community collectively. And we need that kind of consciousness established within our community so that we can begin to slowly but surely, one by one, address, mend, and repair each of these challenges that we face.
So, Dr. Muhammad, when we talk about the attack on Black youth in America, and you're also talking about how you're seeing this also in the islands where you are in Trinidad.
Yeah.
Do you think this is this attack that you're seeing on youth specifically? Let's talk about where you are from. Is it something that's intentional that's being done, or is it just something from just the lack of development and growth of the Black people, let's say in Trinidad?
Yeah. Well, it's become part of the culture coming out of the history to be aggressive towards the offspring of the underclass. In America, you have, of course, the same continuation of attacks on Black youth, which are linked to scripture. This is the highest and most effective form of warfare. Instead of shooting guns, bombs, missiles, and torpedoes on a population, if you damage the birth of their offspring in the same way that King Herod went after the Christ child and the Pharaoh looked for the baby Messiah, if you can stop them from there, then you've achieved the objectives of your confrontation in advance. When it comes to Black youth represent the introduction of the new world and a complete liberation after 400 years of enslavement. But if those same Black youth are subject to an educational system that cripples their thinking ability and makes them burden bearers instead of wealth sharers, then you don't even have to go to war against them, because they're already defeated and conquered by the fact that their ambition has been taken away from them. And in addition to us being in that frame of mind, we now become a fertile breeding ground for other races in Caribbean societies to export guns and drugs and circulate them in the communities where poor people live. And then, of course, we're the ones who end up going to jail for it. So according to the research in the Caribbean, no Black people are the top level drug lords or drug traffickers. They are white, they are Chinese, they are Syrian, and they're East Indian. But when you go into the prisons, as I go into the prisons, 95% of the people in the prisons are Black and are in there for drug offenses. So that within itself, it cannot be by accident. If you roll a dice 6 times and all 6 times it falls on the same number, then it's not a coincidence.
Something is up. So let me ask you this last question before we close out. How could, if you can briefly tell us, how can those who are watching this broadcast order a copy of your book, Dr. Muhammad?
Right. Well, they can go on to our website, www.blackagendaproject.com, and just click on the online store. They'll be able to get the new book, Black Youth at Risk. They'll be able to get Black Studies. They'll be able to get some of my lectures, audio books, and also the downloadable PDF files, which instantly download onto your computers. So it's www.blackagendaproject.com. And that same handle, Black Agenda Project, could be used for Facebook, YouTube, or Instagram. Facebook.com/Black Agenda Project.
Well, we appreciate you, my brother. We appreciate your commentary every month. We look forward to you on next month. And we thank all of you all for joining us today. And make sure you get our brother's book. And thank you all for tuning into National Network View News. Please share your thoughts with us in the comments section as you watch these videos. Make sure you also follow us on social media at NNV News. And please subscribe to our YouTube channel on YouTube, which is NNV News as well. This is your brother Willie Muhammad with National Network View. Peace.
Be a part of the force that powers truth in journalism. Go to nnvnews.com/donate.